All right, good morning. Today's Wednesday, November 25th, and welcome to everybody to the Gating Committee meeting. Do want to say with Thanksgiving obviously right around the corner for everybody, I'm very thankful for you guys in this group for taking the time and also the feedback and guidance that you have provided and will also provide today and in the coming weeks. With that, I'm also thankful for we've had information, as you've seen on TV, come out about we can anticipate a vaccine that is on the horizon. And although everyone won't be receiving it next month, it is a huge step in knowing that it's coming and that the end of gating meetings could hopefully be sometime. There's talking right now in the spring. So that is positive information. Since I've sent out the data and information yesterday, I think it's important that information went out to the committee, that Sedgwick County did put out an order that's effective November 27th at 12:01 a.m. And also they put out recommendations. So there's two pieces of it. I think it's important to note that Sedgwick County puts recommendations and has items, obviously, that's orders, recommendations, because for schools, when it includes that information, that school boards remain the rights of what takes place in schools. So those come as recommendations. So with that, I wanted to share real quick with you what those recommendations were for Sedgwick County. And I believe you should have received a link for that too. The aspect related to this committee would be that they stated that schools, colleges, and universities should utilize remote learning as much as possible, is what it said. I also remind you too, on November 9th of 2020, the board did approve an updated chart that does look at local information, and we have been doing that. And it did also include a disclaimer that Sedgwick County could direct change at any time. So keeping that in mind, just as we look at information today. So with that being said, the next piece is each committee member did receive supporting information. We'll take time today if you guys have any questions of the information that you did receive. But first, for those people that we do know, we have people viewing on YouTube also, that we do want to provide a summary for those that are watching. And then also if you guys have questions as we go of our information. So we'll start with on there, Nikki, to give a summary of what we're seeing regarding students.
Okay, so in the last couple of weeks, from November 2nd through 6th, we had 12 students. The next week is when we met for gating. We had 23 students. The week after that, 21. And then as of today, from Monday through today at 9 o'clock, we have 11 positive students. If you look at that trend, it looks like we're kind of stable, as in, the last couple of weeks we've been in the 20s. If you look down at our 2-week gating committee numbers, which is another piece that we look at, it does show that in those 2 weeks time frame, we are increasing from that 30 October 29th through November 10th. November 11th through today, we have 41.
Thank you. Any questions for Nikki on student information or anything that you reviewed regarding students? Okay, if not, we'll go on to the summary from Holly regarding attendance.
Okay, so for attendance, we still have the same 2 tabs. I will share, and thank you, Mr. Watson, for having some good calculations there, that we copied over information from another spreadsheet, and our formulas didn't quite copy over, nor did our conditional formatting. So we did make a few changes to the first spreadsheet this morning. Keep in mind that our first spreadsheet looks at both overall in-person and remote attendance. That was one of the questions during our first gating meeting or so. And so we have two different tabs that we look at. And so on this first one, just highlighting the change, because I know you all have had the information for a while. Cooper is still red. Let's just get it down to the right size here. Derby Hills is still green. And then for El Paso, we did change the in-person from yellow to orange, and then the remote from yellow to green. So there was a change there. In Oaklawn, we also changed remote to orange because of the difference in our attendance and absenteeism rate there. For Park Hill, we changed remote to green. And then for Swaney, we changed the overall percentage back to green. And for Tanglewood, the in-person was moved to orange and the remote to green. And then the other change that we had was Derby Middle was changed to orange, the in-person number. So that kind of went the other way. And then Derby North Middle had somehow gotten, with that formula change, flipped over to yellow. And so we moved them back to green. So that's that first spreadsheet that we developed to look at the number of periods and how many students were missing, and breaking it down by in-person, remote, and then overall. And then when we look at the second spreadsheet, which is really the one that we've been paying a lot of attention to at the kind of request and consensus of the committee, is our sheet that you see with the numbers that we've been using and listing the schools as yellow, orange, or red below on our recommended gating criteria. And so this one takes our quarantine students and again is used to gauge the overall impact that the virus is having on our schools and on our students who are either positive or in quarantine. So with this one, Cooper is red, is listed on your sheet. Derby Hills is green. El Paso is orange on their absenteeism rate compared to last year. Oaklawn, orange. Park Hill is yellow. Swaney also yellow. Tanglewood is orange. Wyantier yellow. And then Derby Middle is red. Derby North Middle is orange, and Derby High School is yellow. Okay. So no changes there. The schools are still listed there on the bottom in their same designation that was sent out to you. Any questions I can answer? Okay, thank you so much.
All right. Next, if there's not any questions, we will go on to Becky giving a staff summary. And then before I know, and I appreciate our doctors being on with this time change, we'll go on to the doctors after that to give a recommendation, because I know some of them are on a in and out during this time frame. So Becky, summary of staff.
Absolutely. I will give a quick overview there. And I will say that I do have some concerns regarding our staff and the positive cases. Since the gating information was shared out with this gating committee yesterday afternoon, we have had 3 new staff cases come in. So I did update that document, the staff trends for gating, so that that would reflect our numbers as of this moment. So when we look at the gating for community criteria, I feel, we generally will look at a big picture, but when I look at our staff, I feel that we are a little bit more in the red there, because we definitely are increasing. And again, I know it's a big picture there, but when we just isolate down to that particular area, looking at our staff trends there, it feels to me like maybe more in the red, or maybe somewhere in between the orange and the red there on our gating criteria. So that's just my feedback regarding that. But I will add also, if we look back since November 9th, we had 6 cases on the 9th through the 13th for that week, new cases. And then last week we had 14 new cases. And then again this week, so far this week, we are at again 14 additional new cases. So that's where I'm feeling that our staff is definitely having an increase when it comes to positive cases there. another little bit to add, and you can see on the dashboard that's posted weekly, last week, 10 of our 14 new cases were elementary staff. And then when we look at this week, half of those are elementary staff. So 7 of the 14 are elementary level teachers. So just another tidbit there as we wrap our minds around all of this data and try to make the best decisions that we can for our students and our staff.
Any questions for Becky? And then on that recommendation, we'd update that chart and we'll show that before, of course, everybody would vote on that, but we'll update that piece from what was originally sent out. All right, if not any questions, I think doctors we have online, what are you seeing? And also reflection on any of the recommendation that we did receive from Sedgwick County Health Department.
I would just add that I've seen just an alarming uptick in cases here in my office of my patients. Every day, somebody calls and them and their wife or family has been positive, needing some kind of supportive medication. There's been a few hospitalizations. People have made it out, sometimes though on oxygen, sometimes feeling like it'll be a long road to recovery. And these are people generally in the 40 to 55 range. I had my first COVID death, which was a 75-year-old, with a long medical history. So nothing concerning there immediately for normal, everyday people who are still active in the community. I've seen no cases of people needing supportive care, anything like kids that have tested positive. They generally just get on their merry way with life. And little ones, not even any calls to report any symptoms when they're if and when they're positive, but very, very few cases in the smaller under 10 age group. I think there's been a lot of questions whether is this disease real, and let's just get some herd immunity and everybody get it. But it's been my observation that that's not really what happens, and even some of the people that do get well have some lasting effects or some delayed effects from the virus that are unpleasant. So I would say we use caution moving forward. Certainly I can see the argument for leaving elementary schools in place because the kids do fine, but we also have to take into account the adults that are around these kids that could get more seriously ill. Marty, I'll let you add in too.
I totally agree with Lorraine. I would say that Dr. Menz, who gave out these recommendations, is an expert. His field is infectious disease. And when the experts say we should go remote, I have to agree with them. I would not go against that. I think we as a community have failed our kids in terms of not wearing our masks enough and have allowed this, to explode. So I'm at the point where I agree that for right now, we need to really try to get this under control in terms of herd immunity. In a few months, we will have the vaccine and we can have herd immunity with that. But having the disease, watching it, I agree with Lorraine, this is not a disease you want because it's mostly parents and grandparents that are getting it, and they are very sick with it. You're right, the kids, do pretty well, but our teachers and parents are the ones that seem to be spreading it. So I would, at this point, agree with severe caution to make sure that, for the next month that we just do what the health department tells us to do. And, hopefully after Christmas, then we can come back and, have better news for everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the doctors?
I guess I would have one question, just more of a clarifying for the two doctors is that you're saying that you would recommend that we follow Dr. Menz's order. Are you in for pre-K 12?
I am at this point, yes, because of where things are at. My heart tells me I'd like to have the kids, the elementary still in school, but the way that things are in the community, I would say that, with the health department as the experts on this saying that we should keep everything remote, I would say for the next month, we should try that at least. not that my heart goes that, keep the kids in school, but, from a medical standpoint, I think, we'd be wise. And whenever you have a specialist tell you to do something, you have to have good evidence to go against him. And I don't have good evidence to go against what Dr. Menz is saying. And so that's why I support his decision.
Okay, any other questions?
Heather, I have a couple questions. Dr. Turner, in the information that you provided for our packet, you talked about hospitals being stretched, which we all agree, wearing masks, and that the CDC director reported that most of the spreads within families and group gatherings that don't observe social distancing. And you go on to quote, like I said, the CDC director, and that, the safest place for kids to be can be in schools, I believe is what he said. So has your stance changed from what was in the packet, I guess, from yesterday?
It has, to the degree that I still believe that, but the health department says for us locally, we should go remote. And so, like I said, my heart says that yes, the schools are probably the safest, but I don't have anything, medically that I can tell you that holds up true for our situation at this point in time. Overall, when you look at the numbers and everything, yes, I would say we'd probably be fine with the kids, the little kids in school. But I can't give you a medical, criteria other than, anecdotal from what we've seen. But like I said, when Dr. Menz is saying it's probably safer at this point to be remote, then I think we have to, weigh that very seriously and come up. I mean, we'd have to have a reason to overrule what he's suggesting to do.
And just for clarification, in the order from yesterday, there was nothing about these recommendations. I think in previous orders, he's actually, stated requirements in the recommendations. And I think in the press release, they put recommendations on there. I don't know if that was from his testimony or whatever at the county commission meeting, or if he just, told them to add that. But I just wanted to clarify that. So it's not actually in the health order. And I think the other thing to consider, we obviously want to keep everybody safe. And I think the safest thing to do would be just to not have anybody meet in person at all, right? But we have to balance, whether keeping kids out of school for 3 weeks going forward makes sense, especially at the elementary school ages. And so, there have been studies about whether or not schools make an impact on the community trends. And from what I've seen, they don't. I had sent out an article to the group, I think a couple of weeks ago, or maybe the meeting prior, about studies that have been done that just don't show the evidence or the data to support schools, causing higher cases in the community. So, anyways, that's where I have a hard time with this, especially with the number of cases we've had. We have seen an uptick a little bit in the schools, but especially at the elementary levels where it seems like we've been able to manage it fairly well. Again, I would have a hard time going full remote at this point in time.
And if I could just interject just with a thought, I think, of course, I don't think there's a person sitting wherever we are all sitting that doesn't want kids to be in person. I can't think of a teacher who does not want that. My concern is just balancing the fact that when you're looking at a school, you're not just looking at it's an ecosystem. And so there are students, but there are also adults, in that. And my concern is, is it probably the best place for kids? Dr. Turner said yes, and I agree, but at the same time, with the order and the suggestions that have come in and the increase in elementary staff cases, to me, I'm also concerned about the safety of our staff. And I think quite a few of them fall into that category where they would be high risk, or they might be in that increased age range. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, just kind of how Dr. Turner said, there are some people in the community who aren't following mask recommendations. I also think there's a chance that there are some families who aren't necessarily keeping their kids home when they're sick. And I think that's something to consider as well.
I'd also
would-
like to add with Thanksgiving coming up, we know people are going to travel. We know they're going to gather. They're being told not to, but people are going to do it anyway. And it would just be the safest thing for the next 3 weeks to be remote until winter break, and then let this run its course. And hopefully by the time we come back in January, we can come back in person. But we have to remember that there are adults in the building too. It's not just the kids. We've got to consider all of the parties at play.
And I would add that the manpower to run the buildings effectively is becoming significantly difficult to cover. And every time I pull a certified reading teacher to cover another class because I cannot fill substitutes, then that means that 63 students don't receive the intervention that they're supposed to get on a daily basis. I'm constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul so that classrooms are covered with certified people. And that's only increasing as the staff cases continue to go up. Covering our classrooms is becoming very, very difficult. And we are constantly on the horn to one another as elementary principals saying, does anyone have any free subs because of our floaters? And every day it's a no. And we have multiple unfilled positions on the daily. And I would agree with what Joel and Kathleen both said about, yes, our students are not having the severity of symptoms and repercussions from this, but our staff members are. And I think that's something that we most definitely need to take into account. I will say every single day that the best place for students to learn is in person. But right now, I don't know that I can keep everyone safe within these four walls.
I'd like to jump in there as well. The elementaries are not okay. We're getting by, but we're putting our staff at risk. We're on the same battle as Shannon, trying to get people to cover. As people are quarantined, it is my staff. And each day that they go in there, they're kind of looking at each other like, who's the next one to go? Yes, I feel it's best to have the kids in there, but I also need to speak up for my staff, and I need to keep my staff safe. My staff, a lot of our staffs are older and they have risk factors, but they're there because of the kids, but I don't know that that's the safest place for them.
And I would prefer to follow this order, hoping to be short-term remote so that we can long-term be in person and mitigate some of this right now. I mean, our ultimate goal is to have kiddos here. It's the best place for them. I understand that. But we have to be able to educate them properly and appropriately when they are here. And that's where the big struggle is happening.
I would just add, I didn't speak to quarantine staff earlier because we were kind of focused on the new positives that we're getting, which again, we did get another one this morning that's come in. So it's kind of that constant, we're processing more and we're hearing from more people. But when we look at the quarantine staff to kind of address the concerns that Shannon was bringing up regarding coverage, we have done a lot of things and put a lot of things in place to try and support our buildings, secondary and elementary, with regards to substitutes and coverage for students. And everyone is doing an incredible job with such creativity and flexibility. It's amazing. It is getting more difficult every week. If we look at last week's Friday snapshot of staff that's in quarantine, we had 74. That was greater by a lot than we'd ever had before. So that was the largest we'd seen, and we could feel it in the buildings. I know that we could. And then it has dropped down a little bit with our Wednesday snapshot for today with 55 staff in quarantine, but we also have staff who are gone for other reasons, and they need to have that time off for a variety of other reasons. And so when you look at that regular impact of staff who are gone for whatever reason, and then we add in the quarantine and the positive cases. The other thing I would just add is our positive cases are taking more time to recover. And And I think that our doctors could have something to add possibly with this too. I don't know what they're necessarily seeing in their practice, but with our positive staff cases that are able to come back at the completion of their 10-day quarantine, they could come back as long as they've been symptom-free for 72 hours. Many of them, and it seems to be more than it used to be, are needing some more time before they feel better, before they feel 100%, before they've been symptom-free for 72 hours. And it's one of those things, a lingering cough or your loss of taste or smell doesn't prevent you from coming back. It's those other symptoms that they're not feeling healthy enough to come back and work. We also had some staff that was able to work remotely during their quarantine, and that is becoming a little bit less frequent too, because people, it seems from my perspective, are getting sicker. And so again, I would kind of lean back on our doctors for more information on that. I'm no medical expert here, but from my perspective, it seems as people are needing more time to recover and are feeling sicker while they're out, not able to work, even those who wanted to continue teaching in a remote setting. So I would just add a little bit to follow up with the comments that Yvonne and Shannon had made regarding that, and just add a little bit more information there.
Yeah, and I would just to add a little bit of context and information to both of the elementary principals' comments about, we're treading water, we're still here, we're working hard, and having to cover classes, but it does add a sense of it adds another level of challenge when you have so many people that are in and out in buildings, and teachers are trying to provide continuous education for kids so that they are learning concrete skills and having time to practice and master skills. When we have, and we do have subs, even in a regular year, but when you see those numbers increase like that, and students are having to combine in different classrooms or have a different sub come in and out, the intensity, the rigor, the quality of education is somewhat just diminished in that process. Even when we do, as our principals have been doing, and our teachers have been doing a really good job at adjusting to those changes as they come.
I read some reports that the CDC had released new guidance saying that in-person learning is a high-risk activity. Is that accurate? Is that an accurate report?
Clint, I can't confirm that. I didn't see that, so I don't know for sure. The only thing that I saw from the CDC was, they did say that, in-school learning is, can be the safest place for kids, but beyond that, all the other stuff, when you actually look at their criteria that they really haven't updated since this summer, all says, use what your community numbers look like and, stay home if it is. And so we are getting some mixed messages all around because we're all still learning. I can say on this virus, it is very unpredictable is the best word to give, is that we don't know what's going on with it. I can't say, if you have the flu, you come to me at the flu, I can say, well, in 2 days, you're going to be sick as a dog for, a week, and then you're going to be better. This one, like Becky was saying, it can take 3, 4, 5 weeks to get over it. You can be better for a couple of weeks, and then people are getting sick and on a ventilator on the 3rd week. And so I also think it acts kind of like mono in the sense that you have the chronic fatigue for months and months with it. So some people are very lucky, get right through it and do fine. Others are like my dad, after 2 weeks, they die from it. So, this is a bad bug that, we have to take serious, but we can't predict it. And that's our problem.
I'll add one more thing to that. And I appreciate everybody's comments and listening to what you're saying and your perspectives. The one thing that bothers me too is something that we haven't really talked about yet or gotten to, and that's our hospital bed availability. And, when we started this process, it was green. We had plenty of beds available, and now it's in the red, and we keep hearing, reports about the hospitals being overrun. And I just, that bothers me too. And I know that it doesn't really apply to a lot of our age staff or our age students, but it could, it's not just the elderly that end up in the hospital. And I guess that's what kind of keeps me up at night is, the risk for our staff, and then hospital bed availability. It's concerning to me.
I have a question for the doctors. The last 3 holidays with large gatherings I can think of, 4th of July, Labor Day, Memorial Day, all saw spikes after those events. Do you anticipate the same spikes after Thanksgiving and after Christmas?
My guess is probably yes, Jeff. I don't know for sure, but I mean, it seemed like we had this big spike right after Halloween. I don't know if it was related to that. To me, it seems like people have just gotten so tired of this virus that we've let our guard down. We haven't finished the race. And so that's where I think the spikes have come. Most of it, from what I'm reading, sounds like it's coming from families spreading within themselves and visiting people. So yeah, I'm really concerned that after tomorrow, in about 10 days, we're going to be inundated again. And then it'll be Christmas, and then it'll be New Year's. So I'm fearing the worst right now, but I'm also very hopeful with these vaccines coming out. They're a bright light. We've just got to endure to the end to get there. So I think we're making it. We just have to make some hard decisions for the next couple of months until, we can make it there.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Turner.
Sure.
I agree with Dr. Turner.
Hey, Heather.
Yes.
Sorry, I kind of started this conversation. I appreciate everybody's feedback, input, principals, staff, the doctors, everything. Again, my questions stem around, again, from yesterday, the information that was presented to us. Both the doctors seem to appear to kind of stay with where we're at, stay with remote learning in secondary and in person with elementary. And it sounds like that has changed, maybe because of Dr. Min's recommendations. But I wanted to just get clarification on that, since that's the information we had from yesterday. And again, appreciate everybody's input as well.
I will just say a couple things. We have seen, and we talk about, like Dr. Turner's comment about it's unpredictable, and things change within not even 24 hours. So I think we have learned as educators and as a group that we have to look at the latest information that we have. As Becky had shared, yes, we did get the Dr. Min's piece. We had been monitoring, and as was reported at Monday's board meeting, we had seen an uptick of staff. So that was reported Monday night prior to the gating piece. But we also then saw a jump within 24 hours. We added, 3 people, and have a staff member this morning. So when you look at that, that rate, it already was a concern that was shared on Monday. And then we have Dr. Min's order, our recommendation come out about schools. And then again, this morning, you open your email and you have another staff case. So I think that's all stuff that this group, takes in consideration as Becky was reporting those numbers. Again, the students were holding where those numbers are, but the staff, we did know that and did report that even before that Monday, that was, we're watching that, you know what I mean, with the numbers going up. Hope that helps clarify. So when you put those two together, I think that, again, that was stated well about when you have a recommendation. I'm not a health professional. I rely on those individuals that are in those positions. And we're getting from Sedgwick County, that's one note. Yes, we look at our data and we're seeing that with staff, but then you have a recommendation from Sedgwick County Health that is saying if you can go remote, that we need to, as a group, really look at that. I too was hopeful, will say that, and I think anyone on the screen is hopeful you can have kids in person, but not to negate. When I said, when we get done with this, I said this at the very beginning, I want our staff, if you guys remember, I said, I want our staff to feel that we have taken care of them. We're proud to be in Derby Public Schools. And, now is one of those times that you have a health recommendation from an official person. And that is something we need to look at along with our staff data. So that's, I think, between now and then. And again, I don't know what's going to happen next week. I don't know what's going to happen between now and tomorrow, because numbers just keep coming, and we've learned to kind of work with that and work to make decisions based on what we're seeing. I hope that helps. That's what we have.
Hey, Mrs. Bohati.
Yes.
One thing that if we could possibly, I know several meetings back, the committee requested to include the student quarantine numbers as a more accurate, real picture of things. Becky did add a few moments later about the staff quarantine. I think it would be maybe going forward, let's include quarantine as well as actual tested positives. Because the reality in this business, unlike many others, you have to hold licenses to be able to be in a classroom supervising kids. And the staff truly becomes the limiting factor that's going to dictate whether the doors can be open or not. So if we could, just for not proposing a whole change to data point, but if Becky could have and present those both at the same time, I think that's is important for the picture. So that's all I got.
All right, noted. Other discussions, comments from the group, reflections?
Heather,
Go ahead.
I think, as we talk about staff, I mean, definitely we've seen an uptick in staff, and I kind of go with what Tim was just saying is if you don't have the staff, I mean, you can't just bring anybody into a classroom and expect them to teach it. And the problem that we also have is that we have subs, some who are okay to come into a classroom, but while they may have signed up to be a sub, that doesn't necessarily mean they're happy about going into a classroom that they know the teacher may have been out on COVID. So I think all of those factor in together. The student positives I'm not as concerned with those because they don't seem to be being affected like our staff numbers are. And we have to do right by our staff as well as our students. And by just not doing anything about it and staying in person, are we truly doing that? And that's what I have to balance out. Are we truly doing what's right for our staff if we continue to go in person when we can put a pause on it and mitigate the cases, clean the schools, get everything fresh, start fresh after the holidays? I do anticipate that we will still see an uptick after Christmas break, but I think if we have that opportunity, then, and we have a medical expert and 2 other doctors saying that it's the best thing to do, I think we have to weigh all of that and look at it heavily. So just my 2 cents.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else?
And I would add to that exactly what Tina said, but for another layer of that, I know our students health-wise are not being impacted as severely as the adults, but their education certainly does get impacted because if I have one positive, and again, mine do not affect nearly as many students as the secondary level because they don't travel to 8 different classrooms with 8 different cohorts or 4 at the high school. But even with ours, I mean, I'm been down to 3 students in a classroom because everyone else is out on quarantine. So I have 3 students that have access to a teacher and 19 students at home that don't. So that significantly impacts how they're learning because they don't have a person. We have an AmeriCorps person that checks in on them, but as far as delivering instruction, we're just relying on videos and activities. So even though their health is not impacted, their educational value is significantly impacted with every student that tests positive, which ripples 10 to 15 more students that are at home due to a close contact.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Or the next thing that we would do is based on obviously the data, we would look at our gating chart, and I'd have Latona pull that up, but let me make sure that we don't have any other comments before we do that and to move on to that next part. Okay. Thank you for that discussion and reflection. So the next part we're going to do, she's going to go ahead and pull up based on that tweak to the chart. Initially, you were sent out the draft. The only tweak was made is student staff trend. We know students is kind of remaining steady, and we had that in orange, but we are seeing that uptick in staff. So we positioned it currently right around orange and red. The other stuff is exactly how that has come out before. So what we would do is, based on the data, the question is going to be, I agree with the gating chart placements for the grading criteria considerations, the community trend, community criteria, building absenteeism, and hospital, how that stands. So we're going to do that piece first and then later determine what color we're in. So this question, either yes or no, you will get a poll if you agree with how this is currently on the chart. So I will have her go ahead and start the poll. If you guys will go ahead and say if you agree or not on this for question 1. Okay, I think there was a couple, maybe our doctors went off, so I think we have 23 out of the 25, 24 out of the 25. Okay. So we'll go ahead and share those results. Okay, so we have 88% agreeing with where we are falling there. Okay. Is there any comments? I know we had a few that weren't in agreement. We had the majority, but is there any comments for, if you want to say for the record? Okay, if not, then based on the sheet, and I have Latona pull that back up so you guys can look at it when we go on to the next question. With this one, considering all information, the other sheet. Well, sorry, you can go to the other one, the one you just pulled up. So we're going to then be looking at the next question's going to be looking at that I would recommend the following placement. So we have orange. Again, when you're in orange, early childhood through 5th grade gives you the option of in-person or hybrid. 6 through 12 gives you hybrid or remote, is how that is. If you move to red, then we're talking we are remote only. So keeping that in mind when we're making a determination, because when you look at the chart right now, we do have items that fall both in red and orange. Keeping in mind our data with students and staff, and then also the recommendations from Sedgwick County Health Department. So we're looking back at the chart, but know the different modes of learning, the differences between orange and red. So considering all information and criteria that is looked at by the gating committee, I would recommend the following placement for November 30th. Do you recommend green, yellow, orange, or red? She'll leave this chart up so you can see that for a second. She's going to flip back over to the other chart so you can see our data, and you guys should have that in your inbox also. And she's going to put the polling on where you feel that we should be November 30th through winter break. I will comment, I do understand that recommendation or the new order goes through the 7th, but the Board of Education has approved the gating piece to go from November 30th to winter break. So we would need to stay with that time frame. Okay, we have 24 out of 25 right now. So where we're at is 83%, so the majority are saying red. So we would move over to red, which would put us between November 30th through January 1st at this time in remote only. That would be K through 12 for our students. And again, I always put the clause in there. For some reason, we take the recommendation from gating committee, we would get that out, but the board always remains the right if there was any change. With that being said, we need to look at our logistics plan. So she's going to go ahead and pull up the logistics plan. With that, the logistics plan, the recommendation, and we will need that, a question for that is, are we fine with keeping it exactly where we're at logistics wise? I think at this point, we don't have anyone in person, but we always put that out. The main thing would be is, so keeping it the same, not having people in. So
Can I ask a question really quick before I would vote? I guess my question would be, if we went remote, would some staff still be coming into the buildings to teach and work? And if so, then should temperature checks be mandatory?
Okay, so should we move, you're saying moving over temperature check, should we move it to the high level is what you're saying?
I mean, because my only thought is, like, even though kids won't be in the building, I know that, you know, there's a chance that some staff might come in to do their teaching if they can. And so at that point, would it just make sense for them to mandatorily have to take their temperature? Since it said it, because at high level it's shall have temperatures checked, but at moderate it just says may be required.
So let's talk about that as a group. You're right. The recommendation is as much as we can, but we're not saying you can't come up to the building. So, you know, if people can stay home, that's the hope. You know what I mean? People can stay home, but if not, you're right. We need to talk about what that looks like. Thoughts on temperature check piece?
I was just going to say, those of us that have been teaching remotely at the high school, we've maintained our temperature checks.
And I guess my thing is, I don't think it's something that people aren't doing. To me, I just wanted to pose the question where, since we're going there, should we just go ahead and move back for this time period?
My question on that, and I don't know that I feel strongly whether we have it or not have it, you know, we're doing it still, we've maintained that as well in our building. But I'm wondering, we've talked before about the effectiveness of it or the impact that it has. Have we sent anyone home for having a temperature, you know, students or staff, and I don't know, I know our doctors they didn't have a very big window of time this morning with the time change, but I don't know if they're still here, but I would be curious to know how they feel about that. Again, not that I have personal feelings strongly, but I wonder about if we move it up, if it's even an effective or a needed tool.
Becky, I'm obviously not a doctor, but I can speak to that just a little bit. I have heard of staff who tested positive after coming to work and taking their temperature and realizing that it was high when they got here. And so I'm not speaking for mandating or not mandating. I just wanted to give that piece of information that we have had staff, you know, go home and then test positive after they did check their temperatures at work.
I thought staff still was continuing. I thought the only change on this one was if students were in the building and that staff were still supposed to be doing this the whole time.
And I think that's been the practice. I was just looking at the language that's been the practice in my building and others. I just think I was just looking at the language and the wording on the chart. That's what made me think of it.
I believe if we are at the state where we feel that remote is the most appropriate setting for the safety and welfare of all students and staff, we should be upholding, for those of us going to the building, the highest degree of protection and safety that we can for those that are coming to work.
Yeah, it feels like all of this should just be on high since we're in red, just for safety's sake.
Okay, any other comments on that? So at this one, we have moving temperature checks over to the high level. We are, just for clarification, district-wide, everybody should currently be doing temperature checks as they enter each building, but yes, it is visually looking. The bottom one is regarding transportation. Right now, we wouldn't be transporting. Are you wanting that moved over? Is that what you're saying?
Well, to me, that one isn't really a point right now because we are remote. I mean, that's kind of a non-issue.
Well, but we do still have activities going on where buses are moving people around. We still have CASHA activities, so buses are still being utilized.
So if that's the case, the difference of the two is before they get in, they would need temperature checked onto the bus.
I feel like everything should be high just because of where we are in the situations. So if we do have kids traveling, it doesn't take that long to do that one extra step to get them on the bus. And I think it maybe falsely gives some people some peace of mind too.
And I'll be honest, as an elementary person, I hadn't thought of the activities. So thank you for bringing that up.
So for our secondary people where we have activities, any feedback on that? That is impacting?
It wouldn't be difficult to do.
Okay. All right, so we have an updated question. It would be presented as is here. So Latona is working to modify our question. If we approve logistics plan as presented on the screen right now, all of them would be in high. Okay. In a minute, we will take the polling of that and see where we're at. Okay. Questions up? We have 23 out of 25. Let's see, we may have. I think we may give just a minute longer. We may have somebody that stepped off. Okay, 23 out of 25. So we'll go ahead and show the results. All right. Similar split from before, 83-17. So we would go with our logistics plan as is. Okay, with that being said, that will conclude our gating committee meeting today. I want to thank you guys for the discussion, reflection that we have had today and your time. The next gating committee meeting will be on Wednesday, December 30th. We have at 1:00 p.m. Will be our next time frame.
So clarifying question, we are making a decision through winter break, not the health order of January 9th.
Yeah, we did. I'm sorry, we did touch on that earlier. The reasoning for that is that it is through winter break. And that's because that's the Board of Education had approved.
Also, just for the benefit of the group, I know we didn't, Keisha did make some changes yesterday on winter sports. And so I know there's been some communication going out. We're going to have to debrief all that, but I know we have that on the logistics plan there. So more information will be coming out about that.
Thank you, Clint. That is true. And how that impacts with families that do have students in sports and spectator information and what that season looks like.
Heather, another quick question I have. If we're deciding to go remote, what happens to all our support staff for the 3 weeks that we're remote? How
Sure. Becky?
Because the reality is now they don't have a paycheck for 3 weeks.
Well, that
They will.
They will. They do have a paycheck for the next 3 weeks. So we have plans in place for our remote staff. We've already been remote at the secondary level and then also at Cooper Elementary. So we have some staff who are working through that already. And so we will send some communication out for our classified staff, but they will have a job and they will have a paycheck. They'll have some options. We have lots of work that needs to be done, even when we're in a remote learning mode. So we will have work for everyone, and they will be working with their direct supervisors and make sure that they have work to do. They will have 3 options, just as our secondary and our elementary staff at Cooper Elementary have had while they've been in the remote learning mode. So they will have work to do. They will have an option to take leave without pay. And they'll also have an option to use their own leave or COVID leave if it applies, if they're eligible for that. So they will have some options and we will work with them. And it is our intent to keep everyone working. And like I said, we do have lots of work to do. And we also have some plans and ideas in place for our substitute teachers, because it's really important to me that we retain these substitutes. We have had an incredible pool of substitutes who have filled a huge need for us. And I would like to keep them working as well, so that they're not going and looking for jobs in other districts. We want to keep them here in Derby. We appreciate them, we value them. So we're looking for ways to keep them working as well. So definitely appreciate your concern, Tina, and we have thought this through and have plans in place, and we will make sure that they all have a job and are paid.
Yes, I appreciate you asking that. So if any of them are viewing and us getting information out, we want to make sure they're taken care of too and know what's going on.
Mrs. Bahati.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is a sidebar conversation with operations, but as Clint alluded to, Keisha's decision, they did put a moratorium in place for facilities. So is that a conversation I need to have with Burke? Per Keisha, no district facilities can be used from December 23rd through the 4th of January. So
correct.
Okay.
Yes, we will. We have that noted, and yes, we will have more conversations. There will be, for individuals on the screen, I know there's a lot of details that we have already said that we have to get out to individuals and obviously for our elementary families to make sure they are aware and what that looks like. I know information's been shared, but continuing to share information for our families about what that looks like with remote. I will say though, even my own daughter came home, so great job to, I know school she goes to, she didn't know which way she was, but we've been practicing just in case. That's what she said. So that is, I think, a positive that the kids, I think, are ready just in case that was needed. All right. With that being said, thank you again for your time. Have a wonderful fall break and great Thanksgiving. Eat lots and lots of whatever you like to eat during that time. We'll see you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.